Some people walk into a room and read it instantly. The mood, the tension, who's lying. That's a measurable kind of intelligence, and school never tested a single part of it. There's no exam for it, no grade, no certificate on any wall. And yet, some people just seem to see things the rest of the room walks right past. They notice the shift in someone's tone before the words even change. They catch the flicker of a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. They know the meeting turned the second the boss recrossed his legs. Psychologists have a quiet name for this. They call it social perception, or thin slicing, the mind's ability to gather huge amounts of information from tiny, almost invisible cues. And here's what the research actually finds. The people who score highest on this kind of intelligence are almost never the loudest in the room. They're the ones sitting slightly back, listening more than they talk, watching the whole picture form. If that's ever felt like you, this next part is going to feel a little uncomfortable, in the way truth usually does, because there are 12 very specific signs you carry this kind of intelligence, and most people who have it don't realize it counts as intelligence at all. They think they're just sensitive. They're not. They're reading a signal everyone else is missing. Let's start with the first one, and it's the sign you probably dismiss the most. Sign 1, you notice the mood of a room the second you enter it, before anyone has said a word. Psychologists studying nonverbal communication call this affective resonance. Your nervous system reading the collective state of the people around you through posture, breath, and micro-expression. It looks like being too sensitive, but it's actually a high-bandwidth perception system running quietly in the background. You walk into a family kitchen and know before anyone speaks that someone has been crying or someone has just been argued with. And the sharpest thing about it is that you almost always turn out to be right about what you felt. Sign 2, you can tell when someone is lying, even when their words are perfectly convincing. Researchers on deception, like Paul Ekman, spent decades documenting the micro-expressions that leak across a face for less than a second when someone hides the truth. Most people miss them entirely. You don't, not because you're paranoid, but because your brain has been unconsciously cataloging the gap between what people say and how their face says it for years. It looks like distrust. It's actually a very accurate internal lie detector, sharpened by more experience than you probably remember collecting. Sign 3, you remember details about people that they never told you. The color of the mug they always reach for, the way their voice softens when their sister's name comes up, the exact story that makes them go quiet at dinner. This is called incidental encoding, the mind absorbing information you weren't consciously trying to store. It looks like a good memory, but it's really pattern recognition in disguise, and it's why people feel strangely known around you after only a few conversations. They can't explain why they opened up so quickly. You already know why. Sign 4, you can predict how a situation will unfold long before anyone else in the room senses trouble. You know the argument is coming 3 sentences before it starts. You know the deal is dead the moment the tone shifts. You can feel a friendship changing months before the friend says a word. Psychologists call this predictive social cognition, the mind extrapolating from tiny behavioral cues into likely futures. From the outside, it looks like pessimism. From the inside, it's just forecasting. And you've learned the hard way that ignoring the forecast rarely ends well. But the next one is the sign that most people mistake for something completely different, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Sign 5, you often stay quiet in group conversations, not because you have nothing to say, but because you're watching the dynamic more than the content. You're tracking who defers to whom, who interrupts whom, who's performing, and who's actually thinking. You're noticing whose laugh is real and whose laugh is a social reflex. This is what researchers on social intelligence describe as observational sampling, collecting data before speaking. It looks like shyness or aloofness, but it's actually the discipline of someone who understands that in most rooms, the person who speaks last speaks most accurately. Sign 6, you can guess what someone does for a living or what kind of childhood they had within a few minutes of meeting them. That instinct isn't magic. It's a form of thin slicing, a concept made famous by psychologist Nalini Embodied, who showed that people can make surprisingly accurate judgments from just a few seconds of behavioral information. Your brain has spent a lifetime tuning that signal. It looks like a party trick. It's actually one of the fastest, most efficient forms of intelligence the mind has, and it works whether you consciously invite it or not. Sign 7, you notice when someone's story doesn't match their body. Their words say, "I'm fine," but their shoulders say something else entirely. Their face says calm, but their hands have gone still in a way that isn't calm at all. Their voice says yes while their eyes are already saying no. Psychologists call this incongruence detection, and it's one of the strongest predictors of accurate empathy. It looks like overthinking. It's actually you refusing to accept a version of reality that doesn't add up, which is why so many people confide in you the second they realize you can already tell. And here's where it gets more interesting. Because the next few signs are the ones observationally intelligent people almost never claim about themselves. Sign 8, you feel other people's emotions physically in your own body before you've even processed them cognitively. A tight chest in a tense room, a knot in your stomach when someone is quietly angry, a sudden heaviness sitting next to a friend who says they're doing great. Neuroscientists studying the insular cortex and mirror systems have shown that this kind of embodied empathy is a real, measurable phenomenon. It looks like being overwhelmed by other people. It's actually a nervous system that reads the room in high resolution, translating what everyone else's face is politely hiding into a sensation you can't ignore. Sign 9. You pick up on the one person in the room who isn't okay, even when they're the one smiling the widest. You clock the quiet friend who laughed a beat too late. You feel the coworker whose good thanks landed a semitone off. You watch the guest at the party who keeps stepping outside for air a little too often. This is a form of attentional prioritization, the mind allocating its focus to signals of hidden distress. It looks like being nosy or worrying too much. It's actually one of the most compassionate forms of intelligence there is, and it's usually the reason people remember you as someone who just knew when they needed a message. Sign 10. You can tell it in 30 seconds whether two people in a room genuinely like each other. Not from their words, but from the physics of them. How close they stand, whose feet point where, whose eyes flick first when the other speaks, whose body leans in a half inch when the other laughs. Researchers on interpersonal synchrony have shown that closeness leaks through posture and microtiming long before people admit it, sometimes long before they know it themselves. It looks like nosiness. It's actually social physics literacy, and it's the reason you can tell which couple at the dinner table is quietly falling apart while everyone else is still admiring the wine. And the next one, this is the one that most observationally intelligent people spend years thinking is a flaw. Sign 11, you replay conversations afterward, sometimes for hours, noticing things you didn't fully register in the moment. The pause before they answered, the word they almost used and swapped out, the topic they steered away from a little too fast, the compliment that arrived a half-second too late to feel real. Psychologists studying reflective cognition find this kind of after-the-fact reanalysis is strongly linked to social accuracy over time. It looks like overthinking or anxiety, but it's how your brain converts raw observation into long-term social intelligence. Most people never do this at all, which is exactly why they misread people forever, and why you almost never do. Sign 12, and this is the deepest one, you can sense when someone is about to change, before they've said a single word about it. The friend is about to leave the relationship, the colleague who's already mentally quit, the family member on the edge of a decision they haven't announced yet, the partner who has stopped daydreaming out loud. This is a form of longitudinal pattern reading, your mind integrating dozens of small shifts across time into one coherent forecast. It looks like intuition. It's really years of quiet, careful, unbroken attention, feeding a model of that person so accurate they sometimes feel exposed just by being in the room with you. What's striking is how consistently all 12 of these get misread from the outside. The observationally intelligent person is called sensitive, quiet, intense, too much in their head. They're told they overthink, that they worry too much, that they should relax and stop reading into things. They're rarely called what they actually are, which is perceptive at a level most people never develop, because our culture rewards the loud kind of intelligence, the kind that answers first, argues fastest, tests best. The kind that fits neatly onto a multiple-choice sheet, not the kind that sits back, watches the whole picture, and understands the room before it speaks. But if you look closely, the observationally intelligent are usually the ones people quietly turn to when something feels off and they can't say why. They're the friend who just had a feeling, the manager who saw the resignation come in a month before HR did, the parent who knew without being told that something at school wasn't right, the stranger on the train who asked a question that unlocked a week's worth of confusion in a single sentence. None of that is measured on a test. None of it shows up in a GPA. And yet, in real life, in relationships and leadership, in negotiations, in the small daily reading of other human beings, it's arguably the most useful intelligence a person can have. Here's the part most people miss. Observational intelligence isn't a personality trait you either have or don't. It's a habit of attention. It grows in people who learned often early that watching carefully was safer or kinder or more interesting than assuming. Some of you learned it from a complicated childhood where reading the room quickly mattered more than being seen. Some of you learned it from being the quiet kid at the back who noticed everything and said very little. Some of you learned it because you simply found people more fascinating than performance, and you never stopped studying them. However you got here, the 12 signs are the evidence. If more than a few of them landed, you're not too sensitive and you're not overthinking. You're running a form of intelligence the standardized world never learned how to score. And there's a strange kind of loneliness that can come with it because most of what you notice, you can't easily say out loud. You can't tell your friend you saw the why behind his story. You can't tell your coworker you felt her leaving the company 3 months ago. You can't tell your family that you knew about the thing they thought they'd hidden. So you carry a great deal of quiet information about the people around you, and you learn to sit with it, gently, without letting it turn into judgment. That restraint, by the way, is also part of the intelligence. Because saying everything is only half of it. Knowing what not to say, and when, is the other half, and it's the half almost no test on Earth could ever measure. And honestly, the world would be a much saner place if it did. If this is you, I'd genuinely like to know which of the 12 felt the most like looking in a mirror. Leave it in the comments. I read every reply, and the patterns in what people choose are always fascinating to watch. If you want to go deeper on this, the next video I'd send you to is the one on the quiet traits of people with unusually high emotional perception. It pairs with this one almost perfectly, and a lot of the same signs show up there in a slightly different key. And if you're new here, this channel decodes one hidden pattern of the mind each week. The quiet forms of intelligence, perception, and character that never get named out loud. Subscribe and turn on notifications so the next one finds you before the algorithm forgets to. Because the people who see the world in high resolution aren't rare because they were born different. They're rare because they never stopped paying attention. And once you know that's what you've been doing your whole life, you stop apologizing for it.